Welcome to Back at the Movies, the podcast where we revisit our favorite Siskel and Ebert episodes.
Almost 50 years ago, two Chicago film critics, Gene Siskel.
I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And Roger Ebert.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
Were hired to discuss movies on a local PBS station. They were rivals and competitors, and over 3 decades, they never missed a chance to let the other one know he was wrong.
Their passion for film made them television stars and helped pave the way for a generation of movie lovers, including your hosts, Dylan Wilcox and Miranda Broder. I'm your co-host, Dylan Wilcox, a movie buff who went from selling popcorn at the local movie theater to working in Hollywood.
And I'm your co-host, Miranda Broder, an English and film teacher living in the Bay Area. We've experienced so many movies together throughout the years, and so many discoveries were thanks to Siskel and Ebert.
We'll be reviewing the movies and the reviewers, discussing if the films hold up and if their opinions hold up, as we hope to discover and rediscover some gems along the way.
This is Back at the Movies, and the balcony is open.
Madonna may sing You Must Love Me at the end of Evita, but must we? On this episode from December 21st, 1996, the guys were not having George Clooney and Michelle Pfeiffer's One Fine Day, James Woods' bad makeup in Ghosts of Mississippi, or the political quote-unquote comedy My Fellow Americans, whatever that is. But today, we're going to focus on 2 movies from genres that were flailing in the mid-1990s, musicals and horror. 30 years later, was Madonna as bad as we remember in Evita? And what did the guys think of Scream, which no one at the time was expecting to be the sleeper hit it ended up being that winter? We'll also hit the road with cult slackers Beavis and Butthead as they do America and discuss the surprising thumbs on this one. Join us as we dive into a bizarre 1996 holiday season back at the movies. Now it's time for Madonna's Evita. Don't cry for me, Miranda Broder. I rewatched Evita.
Don't cry for me, Dylan Wilcox. The truth
is I never liked it.
Now, come on. You never liked it?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Come on. Let's be real. You liked it, I'm sure.
I kind of liked it. Here's what happened.
Okay.
During college.
Yes.
I could go see movies for free.
Yes.
I begged my friend to go see Evita with me. Now, let me just back up a little bit. I grew up loving musicals.
Yes.
And the 90s, and I didn't, rewatching this, I was like, what were the other 90s musicals? And I looked it up. There were like none. The territory was totally ceded to Disney.
Yeah.
So you had of course you had Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King and Aladdin. But It was like this and Newsies. That's what...
Which you liked Newsies, I remember at the time.
I did. I can't... See, I can't do this because you remember.
I know, I remember.
There are some bangers in Newsies. And there are some bangers in Evita too. Let's... Does it need any introduction? Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. It was in development for years. Everybody and their mother. You were probably attached to play Evita at some point, Miranda. But Madonna, Madonna got the gig.
Yes.
And she put her heart into it.
She wrote a 4-page, request to be involved. They originally had thought Michelle Pfeiffer, I think Glenn Close and Meryl Streep were considered.
Not many Argentinians on the list, but we'll just have to bring that caveat.
Yes.
That's a reason this movie probably wouldn't apply today. All right, here's Ebert's intro.
This production of Evita has been a very long time arriving on the screen. It went through many previous directors, producers, and stars before finally being directed by Alan Parker and starring Madonna, Antonio Banderas, and Jonathan Pryce. But watching the film, I think this is just about the best movie version of Evita we could have hoped for. Madonna was sure she could play the woman of the people who rose from a humble background to help make Juan Perón the president of Argentina, and Madonna was right.
There is only one man who can lead any workers' regime.
Okay, I left in the clip of her singing because I just thought it was like, it's the best version this movie could be. And then it's not like Patti LuPone singing, it's Madonna. And I say this as a Madonna defendant.
Yeah.
I love her. I loved her in the 90s. And look, I actually rewatching it. Wait, let me back up. So I begged my friend to see this in the movie theater. And halfway through, she leans over to me and she's like, "Can we not?" And we walked out. But I was curious enough and respectful enough of the Queen to go back and watch the whole thing. So I actually saw it 1.5 times in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same way that I came in with an open mind, and I actually am a lover of Madonna. Not just her music, but also her movies. I loved Desperately Seeking Susan. And my biggest claim to fame of loving Madonna movies is I really actually did really like Who's That Girl, which I think is pretty rare.
I've never seen it, so...
Oh, you've never seen it? Oh my
No.
God, it's fabulous. I love it.
Okay,
And so,
I'll add it to
like
my
that
list.
said, that to me, like that should right there just like be that just is, proof enough
That is street cred for Madonna movies.
yes, that the reason, me not liking this movie has nothing to do with Madonna. It's like,
Yeah.
love Madonna.
And she's working... Well, here, let's hear Ebert's next clip.
If there was a weakness in the film Evita, I think it's with the original material. I thought Madonna was charismatic and convincing. Banderas and Price were well cast and effective, and Parker's production was visually enthralling. But I left the movie as I left the play, wishing somebody would tell me what Evita was really trying to say.
I totally agree. And rewatching it, it's annoying when I watch a movie about someone and I just feel like I know even less, or I can't really trust what they're saying because I'm like, is this artistic license, or like what are we doing here? And there are some really good songs, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't know if this material has a strong point of view about Evita, about the Perones, about what their legacy is. It's just kind of like oddly rote. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, camp. I feel like it's total camp. And it's like, it's one thing to be campy when it comes to like non-serious subjects, or I think this, I mean, I'm a musical lover as well. I love musicals. I'm not one of these people who can't like suspend disbelief in a musical. I do tend to scoff when there's a musical that's made of like something really serious and really like when it's a more sad topic. And they make it into the musical version. I'm always like, oh, okay. I'm a little skeptical. I'm a little wary of that. But yeah, I mean, that can work, right?
Yeah.
But this did not work in my book. First of all, like you said, didn't learn anything. Didn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And they agree with this. Siskel agrees with us too. Here he is in clip 3.
Well, I think you're right on target in terms of that as politics, as journalism, which is, of course, our attitude toward anything that we see as newspaper guys. We don't learn that much.
No, you don't learn a thing.
So that it is pure musical, and as a pure musical, it's very effective. The decision to make it all singing is a smart one. So it works as a piece. It's good looking. She's charismatic. Banderas is good. I happen to like I Could Be Really Good For You. That song, I think, is very well done. And I like it.
I liked it. I just don't feel that I learned anything very much about Argentina, about Juan Perón, about Evita Perón or Eva Perón.
No.
Eva Perón.
Eva Perón. I disagree that all this sing through works, and there's just a theatricality that's really hard to capture on the screen, and it all feels very workmanlike. But again, I go back to the material doesn't have a strong point of view about her. The movie doesn't feel like it has a strong point of view, so it just feels very like meh. It's It
I
just
don't think we learn anything new or really anything even old. It seems like it's just a vehicle to showcase her voice and the songs.
And I don't hate her in it. I think she's fine. It's just the role needs a real powerhouse. I mean, Patti LuPone did it on Broadway. Like, just needs someone who can really take control and own the screen. And,
have you seen it? Have you seen the
I did. I saw it on stage and in high school. I am not a huge Andrew Lloyd Webber fan. I think, remember growing up in our community theater circles, it was like Andrew Lloyd Webber or Stephen Sondheim. And I'm like, Sondheim, 100%. Because I think Andrew Lloyd Webber does like know how to write some good songs, but there's no subtext. There's no anything else going on. It's like, oh, this is a rags to riches story about Evita, period. Yeah. There's this great quote from Hal Prince, who directed Evita on stage and a bunch of Andrew Lloyd Webber's other stuff. And Andrew Lloyd Webber asked if he wanted to direct Cats. And Hal Prince is like, reads it. He's like, is this about Margaret Thatcher? Is this about the monarchy in England? What is this about? Yeah. And apparently Andrew Lloyd Webber says, it's about cats. And I thought of that quote watching this movie. And the staging was really cool, I remember. But without the staging and without like a real dynamite cast, it's just like, there's no it's not like, it's not ironic about their reign. It's not saying anything about like a dictatorship. And watching it, especially with Trump and dictatorship percolating in our country, made it even more feel remote and bland and removed from anything interesting. Yeah.
And this director, Alan Parker, he had been, this had come hot off the heels of The Commitments, which did really well. And it was a little more indie. I mean, he did Pink Floyd's The Wall originally. I think he did Fame.
Seemed like the go-to really for musicals.
Successful, yeah. So it wasn't like he hadn't had like, some successful movies in the past. I just didn't think that this one, and maybe it did have to do with the writing more so than the directing.
I think so too. Roger Ebert shares on the Andrew Lloyd Webber shade in the next clip.
Don't you feel, though, that Andrew Lloyd Webber, I mean, in Phantom of the Opera and some of these others, he gets one song, and a score used to mean like maybe 20 songs. If he gets one song, he figures it's time to start rehearsals.
Well, I take him on a case-by-case basis.
I'm like, and watching the movie, first of all, what her death, which bookends the movie, spoiler alert, she dies.
33, young. Yeah.
The first part goes on for so long about the funeral. And then the last part, it just feels like a half an hour. They added a song, which went on to win the Oscar. But I'm like, this, like half the movie, it just feels like about her death. And it was really slow. That's
the thing. It's really
watching
slow.
It, I'm like, when is this going to get going? And then like she's on her deathbed. I'm like, how is there still a half an hour to go?
Yes. It actually, though, at the time, it earned $141 million worldwide. That's pretty good. I mean, I think it was probably Madonna.
That surprised me to hear that. I think it's Madonna. I think that's like, everyone's like, why do you always have to cast a star that's not right for the role? Because they get in people that might not normally. It's a music, which often can translate internationally. Yeah. And the reviews were respectable at the time.
It won some awards. It did win for You Must Love Me, the song, an Oscar. And then Golden Globe.
She won Best Actress. It was a big, like, oh my gosh, Madonna won a Golden Globe. And that
Best Picture Comedy or Musical. It won.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
makes sense.
It was like the one musical of the decade. But like, we have to award it just to keep the title of the award relevant. But that was the year that she had won the Golden Globe, and it was Courtney Love was also in the awards talk for The People versus Larry Flint. And the big question was, are there going to be not one, but two star musicians turned actress nominated for Best Actress at the Oscars? And at the end of the day, neither of them were nominated. Madonna in particularly was pissed, and she made it clear that like she was deigning to come to the Oscars to sing You Must Love Me, which she ended up doing.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm not rewatching it and being like, I can't believe she wasn't nominated.
Yeah.
She's fine. She's fine.
Yeah. So, you were talking before about like Andrew Lloyd Webber saying that Cats was about cats. And so I don't want to like over analyze this movie, but I do think it's worth noting that it came out in 1996, right after the re-election of Clinton, Bill Clinton, and after a little bit of scandal. It was prior to the Monica Lewinsky stuff, but right after all of the, Paula Jones. And do you think that the movie is a response? Like, why make this movie now? Why make it in 1996?
I think they made it now because they finally could make it now. And I don't think they were like, oh, the culture is finally right for this movie. I think something like Chicago was ahead of its time in terms of like that, came out in the 70s, but then the revival really took off after OJ, and like the kind of culture got more used to scandal. I feel like this movie might have just been made in a vacuum, and they finally got it financed and finally found a director and finally figured out the rights. And I wonder if the stars were more aligned. This was also the time of like The West Wing and American President. And I think that felt more in the zeitgeist of, oh, politics can be great. Before the impeachment stuff.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's why, I wish the movie was deeper so it would feel more relevant to talk about what was going on at the time. But I feel like the movie is just like, it's a Cinderella story, and that's not interesting. You're talking about controversial leaders of a country.
Yeah. So would you give it a thumbs down?
It's a thumbs down for me.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's a thumbs down for me as well. It's not worth watching again.
Yeah, and their review, I was surprised they were both thumbs up because they didn't seem very excited about it.
I was going to say, they seem to agree.
It's always weird when we agree with them, but our thumbs are different.
Yeah, they seem to praise it for its production value and the singing and the cinematography and whatnot, but not the writing. Yeah. They were down on the writing.
And when you think of like Moulin Rouge came out 4 years later, and that had so much electricity and excitement and energy, just makes this feel even more like stuffy.
It'll be interesting when we talk about Moulin Rouge.
We won't.
We won't?
No, it came out in 2000.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I didn't like it as much as you did.
No.
But it might be the first movie that we actually can disagree on.
Well, maybe we can talk about Newsies.
Oh, okay.
The one other live action musical of the 90s. That's still hard to believe.
One of the movies we're talking about today is Scream. It is a slasher film by Wes Craven, directed by Wes Craven, and written by Kevin Williamson, starring David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, and Drew Barrymore makes an appearance in the film. This is the film that Courtney Cox and David Arquette met each other on. They were married for several years. And, it's definitely a classic. It's probably the biggest classic of all the movies we're going to talk about today on our podcast.
Yeah, let's hear Ebert introducing Scream.
Here at Last is a movie that at least knows that there are formulas. Almost all teenagers go to a lot of horror movies, except for the teenagers who are in horror movies. They've never seen a single one. That's why they always make the same stupid mistakes that always get teenagers killed in horror movies. Wes Craven is a director who has made a lot of slasher films. His credits include Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And now he's made Scream, a picture about a slasher terrorizing a group of teenagers who are horror movie fans and already know what to do and what not to do.
That was the thing I liked about this film the most, is that it refers back to other horror movies a lot. It was like a fun movie to watch, and I remember seeing it when it came out in the theater and thinking, this is definitely going to be a hit. Did you see it in the theater, Dylan?
A bunch of times. I worked at the movie theater where it played at. It came out, late December during the Oscar window, and I don't think they had many high hopes for it. I think it's really interesting to think about where the horror genre was in 1996. You would have had so many Halloweens, so many Jasons, so many Nightmare on Elm Streets. Wes Craven directed the first one. And it was such a played out genre. And it was like mainly, it felt like directed video. And it just, everyone kind of knew the rules and were bored by it. So when this movie came out, it was such a huge jolt in the arm for the horror genre. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that. And then like shortly after it, I Know What You Did Last Summer came out. That was like a big one too. And The Faculty, like there was like several movies that came out that were kind of, this had launched a reboot of the horror genre.
It was really one of the first like postmodern movies of the 90s, and the idea that the kids were aware of what the tropes were was just like really unique.
Yes.
And the movie played for a while. It was really like a cult movie in the sense that it didn't have a big footprint when it first came out, but people just kept coming and coming and coming. I was really curious what Siskel and Ebert were going to think about this, especially looking back on it 25 years later.
Yeah.
And now we're on Scream number, maybe 7.
Hey.
We've definitely gone through Scream 6 and like so many different generations. Here's what Ebert thought in clip 6.
Scream is one of those movies where a lot depends on the attitude you take to it. On the one hand, it is a violent and frightening film. The R rating is well deserved. On the other hand, it's a satire on violent and frightening films, and audiences who have seen a lot of horror movies are probably going to enjoy it more on that level. I have seen lots of horror films, and I did enjoy it because for once, the teenagers weren't making the same old stupid mistakes. Nope, they were making new stupid mistakes.
He got it. You can hear kind of in his voice the resignation of the horror genre, and I just feel like they didn't really take it seriously. And I don't remember a lot of movies that they reviewed on their show because I think horror was kind of beneath them and beneath the critics. And I think this movie kind of took them by surprise.
Prior to that, it had been pretty low budge, I think. And, so I think this was actually, and it also had a major star in it, Drew Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore, which, listeners, at the time, it was kind of a surprise that she gets offed at the beginning of the movie. It was very much a
Psycho.
Shout out to Psycho moment.
Yes.
Yeah. And Drew Barrymore, interestingly enough, like this was the time when her career was a bit on the rebound. She had done Mad Love, and she was kind of had a bad girl reputation. And this is like before rom-com Drew Barrymore. And so it was fun to see her at the time, the biggest name in the movie, get it.
And it's a great, Hitchcock, I think, sort of invented that idea that, you take somebody who's probably the biggest star in a movie, and then have them die in the first like 20 minutes of the film. Like it really sets it up for, okay, anything can happen in this movie. Anyone can die. You can't get attached to anyone because everyone is game, for murder.
Yeah. And the opening scene shows you that it's going to work on 2 levels, that it's aware that it's a horror movie, so it's going to be fun, but it's also scary as hell. I remember watching it with my friend who didn't go see a lot of horror movies. Yeah. And she had this, like, after the first scene, this physical dread of, she leaned over to me. She's like, dude, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, I know. That's what I thought the first time I watched. This is the second time I was watching it with her.
Yes.
The second time I was watching it, first time with her. And I was like, I felt the same way. And it does feel like a really great horror movie feels like a roller coaster where you just strap in the beginning and you're not going to get off until it's over.
I had actually, when I was rewatching, I hadn't seen it since it first came out. And then I rewatched it for our podcast. Yeah. And so I rewatched it for the podcast, and I was actually trying to get one of my kids to watch it with me. I have a 20-year-old and 12-year-old. And so I first hit on the 20-year-old, and I was like, come on. She's like, no, it's not really my type of movie. I'm like, oh, it won't be that scary, because I didn't remember it being that scary. Or maybe I just had thought, oh, Scream, it's become almost like this, not a cliche, but it's like, it was such a popular movie. Like, I can't possibly imagine that it would just scare me at this point. But anyway, she wouldn't watch it, and my son refused to watch it. And within the first 10 minutes of the movie, I'm like, I'm so glad my 12-year-old didn't watch this with me, because this is truly very scary and bloody and gory. And
and it was a little too gory for Siskel. Here was his reaction in clip 7.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of horror films too, probably the same exact number as you, and I didn't get into the picture. I don't think it's really as much of a clever satire as you're suggesting, because I think that it starts out as a slasher film and then adds this other material, this knowing material, but you still have to sit there, even if you're hip to the satire, Roger, and watch girls being stalked, ripped apart, and it isn't fun. So the attitude that I brought, which is always neutral to a picture, was depressed at the 25-minute mark in this film, and I, smiled knowingly at what the film was saying.
Listening to him talk about it reminded me of so much of the conversation around this time in the 90s was about violence in movies and violence in TV, and is violence corrupting our youth. And that was what the horror genre was. It was, we lived through the 80s and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was so sexist and so misogynistic. And you can feel, like Siskel said, he was neutral, but I don't know if he was, because he was carrying so much of that to this movie.
Well, they even talk about it within the movie.
They talk about it in the movie.
The principal keeps on talking about how these kids are desensitized, and he can't believe that they're laughing or making a mockery of this terrible thing that has happened to one of their fellow students. And I'm sure that that's the writer and director's kind of F you to people or the haters,
But yeah, it was a very, especially in 1996 with Bob Dole, and you had Tipper Gore. A lot of politicians were too much violence, that's when they added the explicit lyrics advisory to cassette tapes. But that was what the cool thing about this movie, and it did feel very generational, where it felt really cool to Gen X, which was known for being too cool for school, being we get it, we're in on the joke, and we can have fun with this as a horror movie, knowing what it's doing, but even being scared shitless anyway.
It ended up earning $173 million worldwide. They did not foresee it making so much money or becoming as successful as it really was. I think it was the top horror movie of its time. At that time, it was the number one earning horror movie.
Because it always had a ceiling. Horror movies really had its fans, but not a lot of other people would go, like my husband. Well, is very selective with the horror movies that we watch. And this
Did you see this?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes, and he loves it, but it's scary.
It is definitely scary. It's this kind of scary movie that I generally don't like, because I really don't like those jump scares. I like a more atmospheric type of more of a haunted mansion kind of. I really liked The Haunting of Hill House and things like that. That sort of scary, where it's eerie and atmospheric. The Innocents, that's also another one of my favorite ones. But this one's more definitely blood and guts and people popping out, and all of the ways in which the camera, it moves around a person where you think, oh my God, it's going to be at any turn, that there's going to be another person. Also, I must shout out, the music in this is very effective. I don't know if you were tuned in when you watched it recently. It's to the music, but the music it's really well done in this film.
It's a really well-crafted film, and you're reminded that Wes Craven is a master at this and has been doing this for years and really takes it seriously and like actually cares about the characters, and they just feel more specific than what was at the time like, oh, a bunch of horny kids go to camp. Like that was horror. And this was like, okay, the kids know this, and so let's play with it. But you actually care about them, and I think that's also why it was a successful franchise.
And there's some really funny parts in it too. Like, you know, she's at one point Nev Campbell's character is talking about how, like, you know, these stupid tropes, these where the woman is it Nev Campbell? I can't remember her. Or,
she says
Barrymore.
Like, she says it's always a girl running up the stairs when she running down the stairs. It's insulting.
When she should be running outside of the house or whatever. And then just like a couple minutes later, she does the very thing.
Yeah, because you're in on the joke, you laugh and scream at the same time. Let's hear a little bit more of their argument when they kind of get into more of the violence of it.
I didn't learn anything.
I don't think it starts out as a slasher film. It starts out already as a satire. For example, the use of the big glass patio doors in the background for the telephone call.
Well, while you're noticing the glass patio doors being shattered, I'm noticing
the fact that they're there,
and I'm noticing a body getting shattered. And I'm not going on the high horse against you. I'm just saying, no. I'm saying that's what I noticed, and I found it offensive.
Okay, would you have enjoyed this more if the characters had not been savvy?
No, it would have been a worse picture, but I'm not recommending it.
Okay.
He was like, I'm not getting on my high horse. I'm like, you're kind of getting on your high horse. It's very high horsey to be like, well, while you were noticing that, I was noticing the bloody teenagers. It's like, I think we were all noticing the bloody teenagers. But then that leads me to think about the nature of the genre, you know, and why some people just take to it. And there's something purging about violence on screen that you see awful things happen, and it's visceral, and it does allow you. And that's one thing I love about movies is, you know, Ebert has called it an empathy machine, and it does allow you for 90 minutes to, if it's well done, to like have that feeling of being stalked by a serial killer in the safe confines of a movie theater or your couch.
And knowing how to fight against them too. Like, I think, you know, there's an argument to be made for showing these kind of movies actually empowering kids to be able to, because that doesn't happen that often, but to at least be able to fight off their nightmares and the things that scare people naturally. You know, like when you go to bed,
facing the fears.
Yeah, facing those fears and knowing that you can triumph against evil. And you know, I agree with Siskel in that it is disturbing, the violence and the seeing like the insides and stuff. You know, like, I mean, it's pretty horrible. It's called a horror movie. But I don't know why he can't step out of his own preference or to just look at the film a little more objectively. That, like, yes, maybe it's not his cup of tea, and maybe he wouldn't have a child watch it, or maybe we all wouldn't have a child watch it. But it's like, is it still no value for people who like horror films? I mean, that's, to me, it's, you know, it's
probably
a classic
checked
for a
out.
reason.
Yeah, hearing him talk about it, I remembered trying to show it to my dad when it came out on video, because we'd watched a few horror movies together, and I was praising it. And my sister and I watched it with him, and 15 minutes in, he was like, nope. And we tried to be a little bit like, no, it's clever. But like, I think if you're just not on the ride, you are not on the ride.
Well, you could say that it actually improves upon that whole all the sexist tropes, and that they're, at least the girls who are in it aren't scantily dressed like they usually were in like all of the, you know, 70s and 80s horror movies. It seems like they were taking advantage a lot of, like, I mean, there was the whole idea that, you know, as soon as they start to have sex, she's a goner, right? Like, I think they mentioned in the movie too that that's one of the tropes, right? That you can't have sex or else you're going to be a goner, because these movies are supposed to be teaching teenagers not to do these kinds of things.
Right. Well, it
whereas
was
this one,
it was also very when you think about the genre started in the late 70s with Black Christmas, but then really like Halloween, and to a
yes,
certain extent Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But in terms of the tropes of the slasher movie, it was Halloween. And then you have the 80s, which also is a very reactionary time in politics and in society. And it does feel like women are objects.
yeah.
Um,
I feel like these movies are specifically made for teenagers, like, because I feel like that period of my life was when I was in certain ways the bravest. Like, I watched so many horror movies between the ages of like 14 and 18. Like, that's when I saw the majority of the horror movies that I've seen. And then little by little, I got more and more sensitized and more scared, to the point where it's like, it's not worth it to me to watch these movies so much. To me, like, when I saw Strangers, for instance, The Strangers in the theater with my husband, that was exactly what I thought when I sat down and it started and I saw what it was going to be. I was like, I'm too like already anxious to like make myself this scared on purpose. It's not like
right.
it's not entertaining to me. It's like I did everything that I can and spent a lot of money to try to get rid of my anxiety. Like, why would I want to pay like $12 to go and make myself have another anxiety attack?
Yeah, I guess. But then the argument's made of like, this is a safe space to have, like, to just get some of it out. Kind of like the cinematic version of screaming into a pillow, maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not my favorite genre because I think the scare moments, if they're cheap, then it feels like pandering and I'm annoyed. Anyone can just like make a really loud noise and have something like creepy come up behind you. But if it's part of the story and it feels really earned and it does take you, if it does feel like a ride, then I love it.
And I think that nowadays horror, I've kind of started getting more into horror in the last couple of years, partly because I have a friend who's like super big horror fan, but also just because I think horror has gotten better like in the last few years. And I think that it's still a pretty low budget indie in a real way. Like, now indie movies are kind of mainstream. I think horror is still a genre that can get away with a lot of subversive types of ideas.
And you're right. It can do it on a budget, which is harder and harder to do. And it's a genre that just still most people who like the genre would want to see it in a movie theater as opposed to home.
And it's probably, I would say, like 10 times scarier to see it in a theater because you're already vulnerable and you're out and about. I've taken to just watching them at home. I think it's a genre that's not going away, and I think it's actually getting better and better. And I actually am really enjoying a lot of the horror movies that are coming out these days.
So big thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I would give it thumbs up as well. It may not be for everybody. And I definitely wouldn't show it to anyone younger than 14, but it's a good, solid, classic horror.
Totally. And it holds up.
Yep.
So we're with Ebert on this one. Siskel, get off your high horse. And then we come to Beavis and Butthead Do America. Okay, so we were not going to talk about this because we were being snobby and being like, why would we talk about Beavis and Butthead? But the guys both surprisingly gave it 2 thumbs up.
Yes.
So we were like, maybe it's worth a little revisit.
Yes.
Beavis and Butthead, based on the 90s cult animated show on MTV, back when MTV was a channel that people watched. Way back in the 1990s. And here is what the guys thought. Here's the first clip.
Beavis and Butthead are cruder versions of the guys in Wayne's World. I suppose they are an acquired taste, but never having seen one of their shows on MTV, I was taken with their adolescent awkwardness, bravado, and vulnerability. Therefore, a modest recommendation of Beavis and Butthead Do America for me.
I did not get the vulnerability, but sure. And here's Ebert.
the movie and the TV series celebrate Beavis and Butthead, and I don't really think they do. I think they're a satire of this kind of couch potato, disaffected attitude, and that Beavis and Butthead are not really presented in all that positive a light. And I kind of enjoyed the satire aimed against them and against stupidity in general.
Well, I mean, the world that they, moral authority coming down is held in even lower regard than Beavis and Butthead. I guess that Mike Judge, the creator of the show, has maybe a low opinion of just about everything, but it's done very, very well.
Yes, it is.
So Miranda and I were like, hey, maybe this is some searing satire of 90s slacker culture that will shed light on the 90s and be like, this is really cool, like in a Clueless way. So we watched it. Miranda, your thoughts?
Okay, well, first I have to say the funniest thing happened last night. So I watched it last night, and I announced to my husband, I have to watch Beavis and Butthead tonight because tomorrow I'm doing my podcast. And I go and I have to get it. I have to view it. And he goes, finally, you're watching a good movie. Like,
boom, another listener.
And he wasn't being sarcastic, I don't think.
Did he watch it with you?
He watched it with me. He was kind of half paying attention because he was kind of working at the same time. But I mean, I genuinely did laugh at a few parts, and he did too. He smiled, and I always smile when he's smiling. So, I mean, it's entertaining. It's nothing deep. I think it's more of a kind of in the moment id kind of show, movie, and it is poking fun at just complete clueless dorks. And it's nothing like Mike Judge's other work, which I have loved more, like Office Space and Idiocracy are two of my favorite comedies. And then, of course, King of the Hill, he's really known for that and very loved for that. And he recently did Silicon Valley, which we really loved.
That was him.
Yeah. And so, I mean, he's a funny guy. He's a funny writer. And I can see I don't know. I thought it was pretty funny, but at the same time, it's not Shakespeare, obviously. But I kind of like that Siskel and Ebert,
Shakespeare.
Oh, Shakespeare. I kind of liked that Siskel and Ebert weren't snobby and still considered it and still gave it a good review.
Yeah.
What about you?
I was like, I can't remember if I'd seen this before or not. And then we put it on, and I remembered the first scene, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I saw this. Didn't remember it. I'm probably not going to remember it. I'm going to be a little snobby. I think it's a skit on MTV where they watch music videos, and I think it was really, even at 80 minutes, a stretch.
Yes.
Too. And I'm going to unfavorably compare it to South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, which came out 3 years later, and I felt really took a TV show and made it fit the movie theater paradigm much better.
Yeah.
Than
South Park I think Beavis and Butthead is a 3-note comedy.
Yeah.
And I think South Park is it's the sky's the limit. So it's it's going to automatically just inherently be much more interesting and funny. Beavis and Butthead, like you say, 80 minutes is... I actually, to be quite honest with you, I did have a couple of drinks before I watched it. And I think that might have added to my enjoyment. And then I also fell asleep for the last 15 minutes of the movie. So...
Well, that's a good thing we're not in 1996 and on a nationally syndicated TV show.
I kept thinking of my ex-boyfriend too. That's kept popping into my mind. It was really,
yeah.
Oh
yeah.
I'm not gonna name names, but
but it's Siskel compared them to Wayne's World, and I was like, another thing in the 90s that I didn't really get.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of that whole slacker Gen X thing I was aware of, but...
Were you not a fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
No.
Oh.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen the first one. I saw the second one in the movie theater, so I did not have the right entry point.
Exactly. You have to see the first one first. You can't, we
right,
wouldn't know what was going on.
We'll add it to the list. I think I knew, Miranda.
You knew nothing, Dylan.
I figured it out.
No. I actually, this is maybe where we differ. We might differ. Yep. Although, like, this is the funny thing. It's like, you are one of the funniest people in the world to me. Like, of people I know, you make me laugh.
Our listeners or listener is like, okay, but go ahead.
No, you in my past made me laugh so hard that, like, it's taken me a couple minutes to recover. Yeah. And I don't think anybody in my life has ever done that. So you are hilarious, but I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if we have different tastes in comedy because, okay, here's the test. Did you like Pet Detective and Dumb and Dumber?
I did like Dumb and Dumber at the time.
Yeah.
Well, we should save this if we ever do Dumb and Dumber, which we probably won't because I tried rewatching it with my husband and like halfway through I was like, oh, sorry. But I died when I saw it in the theater.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I actually did like Bill and Ted's, and I did like, you know, I was a fan of, like, you know, those kind of 90s comedy things. Like, I liked all the Saturday Night Live skits that had become movies. Maybe I didn't like the Coneheads.
I'm trying to reconcile with you thinking I'm funny while also saying that we have different tastes in comedy, because that should mean that I don't think I'm funny at all. And I think I'm a fucking scream.
Do you? Do you think you're a fucking scream?
Sometimes. I mean, probably not in the right way.
I don't know. I have to take that back. I think we do have some comedies in common. Okay, let's name some
and
comedies.
I will concede that often I am very sensitive. If I feel like comedy is just pandering and not like structured properly, then if I feel it's lazy and going for the same joke over and over, I start to tune out. And with Beavis and Butthead, when they went back to Cornholio the second time, I was like, we got it.
I think maybe what it is I'm more okay with stupidity than you are.
I am okay with stupidity as long as it's smart stupidity.
Now, okay, what are your favorite comedies? Top five, quickly.
Tootsie.
Yes, I was Tootsie.
Flirting with Disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Bullets Over Broadway.
Okay.
Ruthless People.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
And then maybe like All About Eve. Does that count?
It's a very dry wit.
Well, I'm impressed I rattled those off the top of my head. I shouldn't be. It's a movie podcast.
What about Annie Hall?
I almost went there, but Bullets Over Broadway was my pick, which is probably now controversial, but at least Woody Allen's not in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Table that conversation for later.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I would agree with all of those. I haven't seen Ruthless People in a long time, but yeah, all good ones.
Ooh, we'll add that to the list. So, thumbs up or thumbs down on Beavis and Butthead?
I mean, I guess I would give it a thumbs up. But it's the thing that makes me crazy, though. It's like, it's so relative, and like, I hate to put down movies that I think are probably more cinematically worthy in certain ways, and yet say okay to this one. But I think for what it is, it's a funny, get stoned, drink a couple of beers and watch it, and it's funny.
We will, in a later episode, dive into the movies relative to their thumbs and Siskel and Ebert when they talk about Full Metal Jacket and Benji the Hunted. But we disagree on this one. I didn't think it was funny enough, even at 80 minutes. And, you know, it was fine, but sometimes fine isn't like funny enough. So it's a little thumbs down for me. Siskel and Ebert, thumbs up. I'm the snob on this one. Whatever.
You're just better than all of us. That's all.
No, I just have better taste in comedies.
That's all. You just have better taste.
Thanks for listening to Back at the Movies. I'm your host, Dylan Wilcox.
And I'm your host, Miranda Broder. You can find us on social and Letterboxd at BATMPOD. That stands for Back at the Movies Pod. We'd like to thank our producer, Travis Bone, and Jay Edwards for the original music.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please give us 2 thumbs up by rating us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. That's our show, and until next time, the balcony is still closed.